Guys, and welcome to Escape with Watch Reviews. My name is Steve, and today we're going to be reviewing the PaganiDesign PD1736. This watch was sent to me for free from the PaganiDesign flagship store on AliExpress. I don't have to send the watch back, but you know the deal by now. It's not going to sway my review one way or the other. The current retail price for this watch is about $130 US, but I'm currently seeing it in my basket after my 7% sales tax for $75. So these things definitely go on sale. Especially during this current 11/11 sale, you're going to get a great price on it. The watch is currently available in 3 different colors, as you can see here. The watch case is made of 316L stainless steel. It has a sapphire crystal, a screw-down crown, a screw-down case back, 200 meters of claimed water resistance. It is supplied on this nylon strap, which is actually pretty nice, and it's powered by the Seiko NH39 automatic movement. A first for me. So this is far from my ideal watch. It's bigger than I like. It's got the open heart, which I'm not a fan of. It's got the 24-hour dial, which I'm not a fan of. But I can't help but like wearing this thing for some reason. I don't know why. I think a lot of it comes down to the comfort of this case. And so, yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit during the wrist shot and during the strap review. So I say we get right into this review, but before we do a quick wrist check. Wearing the PaganiDesign PD1701. Actually did a couple little modifications to this one just yesterday. So I swapped in a AR crystal and put in a aluminum bezel insert. Really happy with how that turned out, though. I think it looks a lot better than before. So Pagani, if you're looking, your PD1731 crystals, they work great in the 1701. Alright, so let's get the dimensions. So being a cushion case, it measures a little weird. I'm just going to measure the entire width here. I'll put that in the spec sheet. So 47 millimeters with the crown, 42.6 for the actual case. Got a thickness of 13.7, a 24 millimeter lug width. We've got a lug tip to lug tip of 51.8 millimeters. And on the supplied canvas strap, it weighs just under 100 grams. So again, the dimensions on this thing are pretty substantial. It's heavy for a watch on a strap like this. It's almost 14 millimeters thick, but it is proportional just because it's so long, 52 almost lug to lug. But I don't know why. I just can't help but like the way that this thing wears. So I'm gonna go outside right now and throw it on my wrist for you. Here we are on my 7.5 inch wrist, and I can pull it off just barely. Definitely on the edge of what I consider wearable for myself. So if you guys like bigger watches, though, this should be fine. But yeah, I think it's got decent little turn down to the lug tips there, and it's super comfortable, though. That's the thing that I keep thinking about this watch. It's very comfortable, and the square case, it just kind of feels right on the wrist. You can see you got tons of light play off of the bezel insert and the crystal. It's very reflective, that's for sure. No AR coating on it, but still, I think, in my opinion, it's still mostly legible. It does look a lot worse on camera than it does in real life, but yeah, that's how it wears. I think it wears pretty good for what it is, though. And popping out in some direct sunlight there, you can see the nice sunburst of the blue on the top. It even goes into the black paint on the bottom. It's a really cool dial. I like it a lot. There's some direct sunlight. It's still, like right there, it's still very legible. So I see no real issues with the watch. Really nicely done, in my opinion. Considering its size, this thing wears really, really good, though. I was surprised at how comfortable it is. Here you can see I'm on the third to smallest hole on the strap there, so that's pretty good size for me. I wouldn't go any smaller than like a 7-inch wrist. But yeah, I think it looks really good. Unfortunately, it is 24 millimeter lug width, so yeah, I don't have any straps for this thing. Thankfully, this one is pretty good, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So let's go back inside and let's get back to this review. All right, so let's talk about the case finishing. And the case finishing on this is not the best I've seen from Pagani, that's for sure. It was very weird. It's not a coarse, it's very fine brushing. I almost thought it was a bead blasted case until I really, looked a little bit closer at it. Right out of the box, I figured it was a bead blasted case just because it looks not as coarse as I'm used to from PaganiDesign. So it is a fully brushed case, as you can see here. Brushed on the tops of the lugs, brushed on the tops of the case, brushed on the case sides, horizontal brushing. You do have drilled lugs, which is nice. You've got really big protruding crown guards here. Those are brushed as well. You've got a fully polished crown with a kind of bead blasted and then polished PaganiDesign logo. I think it all looks okay. The brushing is definitely not the best, like I mentioned. You can kind of see it here, getting up close. You can kind of see on the transitions from the different surfaces. It loses some of the details in the brushing. I think if they would have just bead blasted this thing fully, it would have been a little bit nicer. You can definitely see right around the tips of these crown guards here where it just gets a little dull, and the brushing is basically gone. So yeah, the brushing, the finishing on this, it's not great. Definitely, I mean, from a distance, you hardly notice it, but you don't need to get up this close to see the poor brushing. I'll say that. So yeah, it's definitely not their best effort. Maybe it's just the case, they're not used to these tight angles and stuff. But yeah, the brushing on this definitely could have been done a lot better. Again, I think they should have just bead blasted the case. I think that would have looked really cool. Flipping it over to the case back here, you got your typical PaganiDesign case back, screw down with your typical notches here, spec sheet around the outside. We'll test this Crystal 4 Sapphire in just a second, but I think the case back, it's fine, it's comfortable, I've got no issues with it. Alright, so let's talk about the bezel on this thing. So the bezel is actually pretty decent. You have a ceramic bezel insert with a lumed pip at 12 o'clock. All the other markers are engraved nicely. Getting up real close here, you can see it's a really nice blue color too. I do like the color of it. Everything is done to a very nice standard. I see no issues with the bezel insert. The bezel itself is stainless steel, really low profile, nice grip on it, even though it has these little notches here where the coin edge doesn't continue, but really nicely done. I'm actually very happy with the bezel on this thing. And getting up real close here, you can see the finishing on the bezel is nicely done. I've got no issues with that. The grip on it is pretty good, especially for being such a low profile. I don't really have any issues turning this bezel. So the bezel action is actually, again, pretty good. You can see here, there's no back play or anything like that. It's 120 click, unidirectional. Really loud, kind of light sounding clicks. But again, pretty nicely done. Again, there's no play in it at all. Very, very surprised by the bezel on this thing. It's nice and smooth, even resistance all the way around. I'm pretty happy with it. I don't see any issues with it. It is just ever so slightly off. I don't know if it's showing up on camera or not, but I mean, it's just barely off. I think it's acceptable. Yeah, it's a good bezel. Surprisingly, a really nice bezel. Now let's talk about the crystal. So first things first, test it for sapphire. You can see there, positive for sapphire on the front and not on the back. So we've got a mineral crystal on the back, sapphire crystal on the front, which again, for $75 is completely acceptable. It is a double dome sapphire crystal. You can see there's no distortion at all. It's very subtly domed there, but it is domed. It looks nice. I don't see any AR coating on it. Legibility hasn't been an issue for me. It's got big enough hands and big enough indices where it's not a big deal. So I think it's a fine crystal, about what I expected for this price range. It's not a negative, not a positive. It's just somewhere in the middle. All right, so let's talk about the dial on this thing. And the dial is actually really nice. It's a sunburst blue, but then it kind of fades to black on the bottom. It's almost like a James Cameron deep sea type of fade. So you got blue on the top, black on the bottom. That blue is sunburst. I don't know if you can see it here. Hopefully you could see it in my wrist shots outside. But it's a really nice subtle blue. I do like it a lot. You have a 24-hour dial here at the kind of a 10:30 position. And it's, again, skeletonized. I mean, it's just a really interesting dial. You have the silver on the top, blue on the bottom. Really unique dial on this thing. There you can see the movement working in the background there. Again, it looks really cool if you're into these. I'm usually not a fan. I just like my designs nice and clean, but definitely, you know, my wife saw this thing and she really liked that, and my kids love it too. So there's definitely a market for this type of dial. It's just not for me, but I do like the execution of the dial. I think it's done pretty nicely. You have double batons at 12. You have single batons at 3, 6, and 9, cut off a little bit for the display window there. Circular indices everywhere else. Those are done pretty nicely. I got no issues with them. I can't help but feel like that 12 o'clock is just off a little bit. There's just something that's not quite right. I can't put my finger on it. It's only when I stare at it that I really notice it. But yeah, it's just something's off there. I'm not sure what it is, but everything else, it's done really nice. You can see these indices, these baton indices. They kind of have like a little step down at the end of them. Really, you know, little detail like that. That's pretty nice to see. You have your applied Pagani shield with PaganiDesign Automatic Divers 200 at the 3 o'clock position. Japan movement down here. You'll notice there's no minute track on this thing, so you're kind of guessing, which is, I mean, typical of this style of watch. But yeah, I think everything else, it's nicely done. I've got no real issues with it. The hands on it are skeletonized as well, and they're nicely sized. They reach right out to where a minute track would be. Nice and bold. The lume on the hands and dial, they all match, and they all look pretty good. I've got no issues with it. Even, you know, getting up close, you don't see any issues with the hands on this thing. I'm overall pretty happy with it. What I'm not happy with is the lume. So I'm going to pop up a lume shot right now, and here you can see it against a couple watches in the collection, and it's just bad. Comically bad. It just fades immediately. A watch like this deserves to have really good lume. This one just doesn't have good lume at all. All right, so let's talk about the movement in this thing. So I'm going to pop up the time grapher, and you can see this one's running pretty good. 10 seconds a day fast. In reality, it's more like 7 seconds a day, but in the dial up position, it is 10 seconds a day fast. It's been fine. It's a Seiko NH movement, so this is the NH39, which basically is just, you know, this 24-hour dial here. And I don't know if it's set up specifically for, I'm assuming it's set up specifically for these open heart style dials. But yeah, I think it's fine. It's obviously nothing fancy. Here you can see how it's decorated, and the decoration is very, very minimal, but it is there. And yeah, it's not anything fancy to look at, but you know, if you're new to mechanical watches and like to see how they work, it's always nice to be able to see it. The movement itself, it works just like you would use a NH35. These movements, they should be accurate and reliable and cheap to replace and all that stuff. Easy to work with. Operated by this 3 o'clock screw down crown with the Pagani logo in it. Plenty of grip on the crown, good size for the crown. The screw in and screw out action, it's a little bit gritty on this one. Not too bad, but definitely I've seen some better ones from Pagani. But again, it's not a deal breaker or anything like that. First position here, hand winds the movement, nice and smooth. Second position, hacks the movement, and there is no date on it. So yeah, really nice. You can see here while setting the time, the 24-hour hand just kind of follows along. And yeah, I mean, it works exactly how you would expect it to work. Everything lines up nicely, and I'm pretty happy with it. The crown is nice and solid feeling, and good action. I got no issues with it. I got no issues with the movement. Just not really a fan of these open heart dials. All right, so let's talk about the strap on this thing. So the strap on this is actually pretty nice. It is 24 millimeters, like I mentioned. That's why I have no other straps for this. 24 millimeters. It tapers down to 22 millimeters at the buckle. The material it's kind of like a nylon material. It's got some nice ridges to it. It's got the silver or gray stitching kind of woven in there. I think it looks really good. You've got leather around the holes here to hopefully keep it from fraying too much. It's a good length for me. I'm kind of right in the middle there. You've got one floating keeper. You've got one stationary keeper. Minimal stitching around the buckle. The buckle is nice and big. It's really thin, which is nice to see. It does flop around a lot, but I think that's mostly because the strap is like 21.5 millimeters. The buckle itself is 22, so it does flop around a little bit, but it does look really nice. It's nice and solid. You've got the PaganiDesign logo in there as well, fully brushed buckle, really a nice buckle, I gotta admit. The buckle is pretty nice. The strap itself is actually really nice and comfortable. You can see here, it's got your size listed here, genuine leather. You got the PaganiDesign branding here. Again, very comfortable. I was surprised at how comfortable this watch was, kind of right out of the box. I mean, it was a stiff strap, and it still is a little bit stiff, but just the way that it wears is very comfortable. I barely feel this thing on the wrist for being such a large watch. Yeah, I mean, it's great. And that's good, because who has 24 millimeter watch bands sitting around? Not very many of us, right? So it's good that the watch band, I think it looks good, and I think it's comfortable. And I mean, you know, very early reaction to it, I do feel like it's going to hold up pretty good. But yeah, I think it's a very nice watch band, especially for this watch. I think it looks the part, and yeah, it's actually nice. So there you go, guys. That is the PD1736, a new watch from PaganiDesign. Definitely not my style, but I gotta say, it is super comfortable. I love the dial on it. The bezel is good. Sapphire crystal, reliable movement, $75. If you are into this case shape and you're into these open heart dials, this is a really good option. 75 bucks. I mean, that's pretty hard to beat during the sale. I say, if you like it, get it. Yeah, there's not, the only real flaw to it is the case finishing. The case finishing is not great, but other than that, it's pretty good. Oh, and the loom is terrible. But yeah, other than that though, it's a pretty good watch. So if you are interested in this, click the link down below. That is an affiliate link that takes you right to the official store, and you're going to be happy with this one. I like it. Definitely not my style, but it has some sort of appeal to me, and I keep wanting to put it on for some reason. So yeah, anyway, I think that's about it. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.